Okay, checkity check, 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 check. Everything going. Okay. Ho, ho, ho! Welcome to the show, everybody. My name is Michael Markowsky. Welcome to my studio today. We are going to recreate another painting by another one of my favorite artists. And today, drum roll, we're going to be looking at Norman Rockwell today. And Norman Rockwell is one of, I think, the most important artists of all time. Look at this collar all... Which way does it go? That way? This way. Norman Rockwell is one of the most important artists of all time, although until really the last couple of decades was often just dismissed as a hack, as a producer of the lowest, most sentimental kitsch, and a tool of the American government, etc. But I think, and I'm happy to say that there's been a complete reevaluation of Norman Rockwell's art and contribution to society, and so we're gonna dive in, and we're gonna make this painting that he did of Santa Claus. Now, he's not the first person to create the image of Santa Claus, but was one of the first who certainly created the look of Santa as we know him today. And so, in celebration of the holidays, we are going to spend a little bit of time looking at this jolly old Saint Nick. So let's look at the plan for today. We're going to get the image onto the canvas. We are going to stain it with a little bit of color. Then we're going to talk a little bit about the biography of Norman Rockwell. And maybe a little bit of underpainting. And then there's not much of a background, so mostly we're just going to be focused on the foreground. Now, I hesitate to say this one's going to go nice and fast, because even though I'm including it as one of our more introductory episodes, we're going to take our time, because this might be one of the first times people have ever done a portrait of human face before. So I'm saying, maybe 2.5 hours, 3 hours by the time we're done, right? So we can take our time. So let's look at the also, if you're just joining us for the very first time, please consider liking, subscribing, hitting that notification bell so you know when upcoming episodes are taking place, including our very popular feedback bonus episodes that we do once a month. And there's another one coming up soon. And if you want to support the channel with a small donation, hey, it's that time of year to support your local artist. Consider leaving a PayPal donation. The link is in the description below, as well as you can contribute through the Super Chat function here within YouTube, or contact me through the Facebook group. So, and we'll show you all of that info in a moment. But let's get right to it. Let's get this image onto the canvas. So, here's our Facebook group. Join that Facebook group. So to get this image onto the canvas, I have done an outline. I've traced it out onto and on my iPad Pro using the Procreate app, and I've put them, all of these outlines, which are all for free, and you can download them and use them as you like. The first few here are the tools for our very introductory color wheel classes. And oh, look, there's a little troll showing up here in the chat. Oh, it's so nice that the Russian trolls are after me again. Okay, we'll just do that. Okay, so our most basic episodes are at the top, and then the next ones here, which I'll begin with letters. These are our most simple, straightforward paintings. That's why Norman Rockwell's up here. And then our more complex paintings are all begin with numbers, and these stretch on infinitely. There's like, 200 plus episodes down there. So of all artists from all over the world, check them out. So anyway, we go down to Norman Rockwell, click on that, and then we've got 3 files. There'll be a 4th one in there shortly. And those files correspond to the original painting and the outline, right? So you can print that outline off on your desk inkjet printer at home, and then we're going to transfer them onto this canvas. I'll show you step by step how that's done. So I'm going to use here a 9x12 sized canvas board. I like this particular brand. I've used them many times, and they haven't let me down yet. And I have also actually gessoed this a second time, so it's got an extra little bit of coat of gesso, which will keep make it just that little bit smoother. So when we're painting faces, that might be preferable. So anyway, I printed that free template out. You can see my inkjet printer is a little running out of ink. So, but it doesn't matter how nice this looks, as long as I can see it well enough to transfer it. And then let's just see. That signature is a little bit crooked, and I think that's on the original, so I'm just going to straighten that out just a little bit. And you know what? I might move this down also. Okay, good enough. You know, maybe I'm also going to move it just a little bit more to the right. Get his eyes kind of closer to the middle there. Okay. So now I'm going to take some carbon transfer paper. You can use graphite paper as well. You can see that this is, I've already used it a bunch of times. Doesn't matter, as long as you can still see the lines on the other side. And always remember, you want the shiny side facing down. I have used some, if you watch older episodes, that are double-sided carbon paper. So in that case, it doesn't matter which side's up or down, because there's going to be some lines being transferred from the carbon paper on both sides. So once again, this whole purpose of doing this is just to help get the image started, to save us some time. So don't worry about making these lines perfect and getting every single one of them there. You'll see that I'm going to kind of omit probably about half of the lines. And we're going to paint over every single little line, so many of these little ones will just completely disappear within, you know, the next half hour or so. So spending too long getting them all perfectly drawn might feel really nice, but then you might be kind of disappointed when most of them just get instantly covered up. So we'll be done here in about 2 minutes. Okay. So now I just want to get the broad direction of those brush strokes, and I think that's good. Let's just take a look. Okay, good enough. Oh, I forgot the signature. The whole reason why. Well, I mean, do I want the signature to be, now that I've pulled it off, so this is why you always wait for a second before you pull it off and make sure you got everything there. Maybe I'll move this so that it's about the same distance from that edge, just to, since I've already moved it. And I'll probably use a Posca pen for this. And if you don't know what that is, well, you will see, won't you? Okay. I'll keep that right out of sight. Nikki's says, I already had my present these days. Michael liked my Van Gogh painting in the group. I was so happy he saw it. It was my Starry Night painting. I look and sound so much better. I did have quite the sniffly nose the last episode there, and so my daughter and I both got sick. She's still on the mend. She's sleeping right now. She's usually running around, so she's got a lot of energy. So when she's sleeping, you know she's not well. Okay, so let's move on to our next step. What's going on? So now what we want to do, now that we've got our image on the canvas, is put a little bit of color on here. Now you could skip this step. If you're happy enough with your canvas like this, you could immediately skip this and kind of maybe go 30 minutes ahead in the timeline from where we are now. I'm going to continue doing what I normally do so that you can see maybe how that will affect the painting. But again, you could skip this step, and this certainly would not be how Norman Rockwell would have made this painting, which we'll talk about when we talk about his biography, but I'm going to do it anyway. Just for the sake of consistency over the course of all these episodes. And I think it's going to have a nice little neat effect. I don't think I needed quite that much paint, but okay. So it's worth just sort of, I just squeeze some paint, and you're probably like, what is that paint? Oh, well, this is exactly what it is. This is our warm yellow, and the brand that I'm using is called Amsterdam. It's sort of a student grade paint. It's not the best. It's certainly not the worst. But it's for pound for buck, it is, I think, the best deal. So, you know, each of these large tubes of paint, which you'll see me using, costs about $12 Canadian, which is like 25 cents American. But you can get a lot of, I can use one of those tubes to paint about 50 paintings, right? That's a lot of paintings to get done. Keep you busy for a good year for most people. So anyway, these are the paints that I'm going to be using. But if you don't have that brand or you can't get it, then here's my recommendations that you could use instead. So golden, this is probably one of the most expensive acrylic paints. You're going to get great results. But most beginners, if you're watching right now, it's probably way more quality than you need, and you probably won't notice any difference. Liquitex, they make a pro and student grade paint as well, and these are my recommendations. Winsor & Newton, Artist Loft from Michael's Art Supply chain of art supply stores. Buzz, Peebo, Holbein, Daler-Rowney, Fevicryl, Novacolor, Chromacolor, but not Museum Color, because they always add white to these colors. It drives me crazy, so I do not recommend you get their paint. Okay, of course you can go back and pause, but I've talked about all of that, what we just saw in our first few episodes of this series. Okay, so I've got my warm yellow, and you saw I just put a little bit of water here. This is the only time I ever use water when I'm making an acrylic painting, which is the general recommendation, is to try to avoid water. Now, some of the earliest episodes I've done, I did use water, mostly because most people use water And so I figured, well, you know, if I'm gonna teach painting, I'll teach it the way most people imagine it's supposed to be done, and this, you know, and then I think my thinking has sort of evolved over time to be like, well, maybe I should just literally demonstrate best practices, as even the manufacturer would tell you, which is to avoid using water if you can help it, and instead to put mediums, mixed mediums, which are just other specially made paint chemicals, additives into the paint to modify it if you want it to be thinner or thicker or whatever you want to do with the paint. There's lots of customizable things that you can do to your painting. Okay. So as I said, Norman Rockwell absolutely did not do this. In case you're like, I don't know how authentic this guy is. I've never seen Rockwell do that. Trust me, yes, I am absolutely, I know. This is my own little spin that I like to put on these paintings. And if only just to encourage you to think about what that first little bit of color on your painting could be. I certainly prefer to just painting directly onto a white canvas. So I think a little bit of color just gives your painting, in this case, a little bit of like that warm golden hour glow. It's very subtle, but it's there, and you know, it's just like a little bit of truffle oil on your French fries, I suppose, right? Okay, so I'm going to move that out of the way, and let's just put a little bit of paint on the palette right now before I move on to the next step, so that... Ooh, that sounded like me over the past few days. From my nose, my nose, not anything, no other bodily sounds. Anyway, so what else am I missing here? It's that time I've got to go through these paints and start to clean those caps once they get a little bit plugged. Although one of the things I will mention is I keep all of these little things, and as some of you may know, I've been slowly adding to this painting here, this J. DeFeo painting we made, almost exactly a year ago. And every day after I'm done a painting, I keep adding all of the paint that I scrape off onto this thing, and look how this thing is just I just think that's so gorgeous. And maybe one day, if I keep on sticking more and more, and see, I'll just cut that up and just glue that right on there with my extra paint, and it just helps build up that texture. And maybe one day, just like J. DeFeo, though I have to take a crane to get this out of the house because it's so heavy. Anyway, go ahead and watch that episode. I also show how to use basically a kind of a paper mache to build up that texture if you don't want to waste. You wouldn't want to just use a whole bunch of fresh paint to do that painting, right? Okay. So let's move this fellow out of the way. Let's bring old Saint Nick back. Oh, actually, you know what? I wonder if I should start the next step so that I can let that dry while we talk. Maybe I will. So, in fact, I'm going to go ahead a step. This is not the way I normally do it. So, I'm just going to do, kind of jump a little bit ahead, because what I'm going to do is apply a second coat of paint over top of my Imprimatura. You could combine these two steps together into one. I think it sort of lessens the result, so that's why I've broken it down into 2 steps. So I'm going to blow dry this yellow paint, my Imprimatura, then I'm going to mix a new paint and apply it over top of this here. So I'm just going to briefly mute my microphone, and for those wondering, I do use the full heat mode on my blow dryer. You just want to make sure that you're moving it around and not just holding it in one place. You might melt something if it's really, really hot. Oh, sorry. I just saw Pascal was talking about Coca-Cola. We will talk about Coca-Cola and the relationship to Coca-Cola and Santa briefly here, because that is a big part of the image of who Santa is. Okay, so what I want to do here is I'm just going to take my plate. I'm going to wipe off most of this yellow. I'm not going to make sure it's, I don't care if it's totally clean, because I want a little bit of that color, but not too much. So let's take, I wonder, what should we do here? I think I'm just going to mix a kind of slightly off white here. So I'm going to take, yeah, I think this is going to look nice, I think. So, and I'm going to give it just a slightly brown quality, because I want it to have maybe the look of, you know what, let's go for a cooler brown. So I'm going to take some of my, and let's mix it right here. So I'm going to mix a cool, mix a cool brown. I'm going to take my cool red and my cool yellow and mix those two together. So first I'm mixing an orange, and this is going to be a more muted orange than if I was to mix those two guys together. And then let's take a little bit of blue and mix that. Put too much blue in there. So you saw how quickly that changed, right? So let's add a bit more yellow. Okay. Now I'm going to take a big scoop of this white. There. And let's take a little, we're going to take now this, in fact I'm going to wipe some of that off, because we can always add more, but we can't add less. Then we'd have to really dilute it. So that's cool. We're getting just a very kind of an eggshell kind of color. And I think this is going to look kind of nice with his beard. Wonder, is that too... I think I'm going to add a bit more white. Let's put more white in there. Okay. And then I'm going to put some of my matte medium into this painting. Okay, let's give this a big stir. I'm worried I might not have enough, so let's add a bit more of this. Whoa! A little more than I was thinking. We'll see now if this is going to be too transparent. Worst comes to worst, we can do another layer. But I think I'm going to add a bit more white. That's a lot. That's a lot, Michael. Ooh, I think I like that better anyway. Okay, good. What a nice color. Okay. And, you know, okay, I just got to be careful that I don't paint over all of the pencil lines, or, you know, if it's too opaque, then I'll lose all the detail of my pencil lines. That's pretty good. I can still see it. That's one of the reasons I put that matte medium in there, is to ensure the thinness. And looks like there was some little chunks of something that came out from somewhere. So I just want to get paint over this whole thing as quickly as possible, because this is going to start to kind of dry a little bit. Okay. Okay, I think that's good enough. Let's just move this out of the way. And I just want to try to clean a bit of this up. I don't like when I have a really dirty work surface. So. It gets in my way. Okay. Interesting. That's going to be... In fact, well, maybe, you know what? I'm going to blow dry this now. Because I think if you're watching, like, whoa, I think we lost Santa. Santa's still there, and when I blow dry this, he'll come back. Okay, so I'm happy with how that's started. It's still going to take some time to dry. It was, when I put it on, kind of thick, and I could see some of the brush strokes coming through on my paintbrush. But because it's acrylic paint, acrylic doesn't really hold the texture very well. So I was pretty confident that as it started to dry, those brush strokes would kind of start to fade away. Of course, we can do things, we can add materials to the paint to make that stick around. But I should also just, I just want to show you, here's a white piece of paper. I don't want to lay it on top there because the paint is still wet. But I just want you to see the slight difference. I don't know how much you can see the difference. But this just looks a little bit more like slightly eggshell hue than this white, right? So we would call this like an unbleached titanium color. It's one of my favorite colors, actually. It's just this kind of little bit of a tan, khaki kind of, well, not a little bit, like more like raw canvas, really is what it looks like. Okay. So now let's take a moment to look at this. So let's now take a little bit of a moment to talk about who Norman Rockwell was and why he's such a revered illustrator and I think one of the great artists of all time. So Norman Rockwell was born in 1894 and dies in 1978 at age 84, which makes him, he was certainly lived a long and full life. I will say that despite a few things that we'll talk about, he had a relatively drama-free life, I would say. Of all the artists that we've covered, this seems to be one of the lives that I've encountered that has the least wild ups and downs, traumatic career difficulties, and he did have a divorce that really spun him out for a little while. But other than that, that's really unusual, I think. Anyway, so Norman Rockwell is born in New York City, and he's born into a family of his father works in the textile industry, and I think from there, if you're around someone who is, selling and sorting, ordering, shipping fabrics of all different kinds of colors and patterns, textures, I just sort of imagine that industry is just very, craft oriented in the best way possible. Like the craftsmanship is really important to people that work in the clothing and textile industry. There's also a big kind of workman-like ethic that I think was involved. And both of those things, besides the fact that Norman Mailer was born into a relatively conservative, religious family. His father was, I think, Episcopal, and his father was Presbyterian, and his mother was Episcopalian. And I think he later became Episcopalian himself. I think those all kind of fed into a particular workmanlike ethic and pride in craftsmanship that it becomes sort of his signature as he goes on. And I think it's also just very important to remember that he's coming to into his own at the height of Cubism, at the height of all these avant-garde art movements which are taking over the art world. And so the kind of art that he would have seen when he was growing up was much more realistic, representational, more photographic, if you would call it. And as he's in school, the whole way that art is being taught and what is being appreciated and seen in magazines and newspapers is completely inverted. So I think that, you know, you have this major split in amongst artists as to like what art should be, right before, during, and after World War One. So, you know, he's really interested in art from a young age. At age 14, he leaves high school and begins his art school career, which I think is remarkable. It's not too unusual for back in the day when high school maybe wasn't as, you know, regimented as it was today. You'd often have, you know, young teenage boys in particular, and girls, leave school early to go help out grandparents on the farm or the family business, etc. And so, but after that, he quickly he goes into the National Academy of Design, and eventually to the Art Students League. And the Art Students League is really one of the most important educational art institutions in New York, and thus in North America, because so many artists of renown have gone through the Art Students League over the years. Many of the American artists we've talked about had some connection to this institution and building at one time or another. And so it's from there that he starts sending his illustrations out to various different magazines and newspapers in search of work. One of the very first jobs that he gets is creating art for Boy's Life. And Boy's Life is the official magazine for the Boy Scouts of America. And I don't know if he was ever a Boy Scout. I didn't find that information out, but anyway, he gets that. He gets a cover printed by the Boy Scouts. Here's that original cover that he created of this boy bandaging a little dog's paw, and from there he begins. I think he makes another 8 images over the course of the next year, and he's kind of already starting to make a little bit of money doing this, and that's, you know, kind of it immediately sends him on a path. From there, he ends up sharing a studio with another illustrator, cartoonist Claude Forsyth, who worked for a magazine now defunct called the Saturday Evening Post. And the Saturday Evening Post was really one of the, or at least became one of the most important magazines during the late 1900s or late 1910s and 20s. And it is basically becomes completely intertwined with the life and career of Norman Rockwell, because Norman Rockwell, starting in 1916, with the help of his new studio mate, starts illustrating the covers to these various Saturday Evening Post. So, you know, and these are they're iconic, famous images, often sort of representing, you know, a very idealized image of American society, often kind of a more small town, community-oriented, very positive overall look at a very particular, mostly white experience of 1930s, 40s, 50s America. And here's one of the early Santa Clauses he did. He also illustrated a whole bunch of books. He illustrated, you know, in here, I'm not sure which one this is. This looks like Huckleberry Finn, I think. So he illustrated Tom Sawyer, Huckleberry Finn. He did covers for literary reviews, for Life magazine, and but the Saturday Evening Post, I think he did 323, 321. I saw different numbers over the course of 47 years. So that's a lot of paintings. And I think the Saturday Evening Post came out once a week. I could be wrong. I think eventually it was once a month, and then you know, with digital it disappeared entirely. But you can see these are many of these iconic images that he did. Now, if we just go back to his biography here. So in World War I, in 1914, he tries to enlist, or no, it's been 1916, because the Americans didn't get involved for a couple of years. So in 1916, he tries to enlist in the American Army and is rejected for being underweight. So he goes home and just eats and eats and eats, fills up on donuts and bananas and as many kind of fluids. He goes back the next day, and he is accepted into the army, but he never sees any combat. He is employed as a military artist, which is something we've been talking about over the past few weeks when we've been looking at a bunch of Canadian artists who formed the Group of Seven, because many of them were also military artists. In Canada, we called them war artists, right? Shortly after World War... and actually the 1930s and 40s are the most productive time of Norman Rockwell's career. Most of his great paintings are created during that 2-decade period, which was not always happy, because he got married in 1916, and his wife appeared in many artworks that he created, Irene O'Connor, but they divorced, 14 years later, and that really kind of sent him into a deep depression. And so he moved from New York all the way onto the West Coast, where he ends up kind of building some roots in the Los Angeles area. And towards the end of his life, he spends a lot of time not so much teaching, but as sort of an artist in residence at Otis School of Art. He sort of has a studio on the campus where students are coming and seeing what he's up to, and he's often working with the students, often incorporating the students into his artwork. But after he remarries, very shortly after, his new wife, I think, really helps him kind of with his whole business aspect of his life, and they have 3 children together. One of his children also becomes the author of his, or co-author, I guess, of his autobiography. But anyway, if I go back up to the, World War II, one of the biggest sort of successes of his career is this series of paintings called the Four Freedoms. And one of the things I was thinking about is most of Norman Rockwell's paintings are really deeply complex, would require hours and hours and hours just to paint one figure if we did this type of composition. So it's lucky that we have I think this painting of Santa Claus by Norman Rockwell that we're doing today is probably the most straightforward, most simple painting that I could ever think of for Norman Rockwell. So that's why it fits perfectly for today. So this is actually one of his most famous paintings, the Freedom of Speech. So this is based on a speech that Dwight D. Eisenhower gave a sort of, during World War II to help, inspire Americans to support the war effort. He gives a speech sort of outlining what makes America great. He talks about these 4 freedoms that are worth fighting for, right? And making a point to kind of point out, like, there are people in Europe who are losing these freedoms. If you want to keep them, we got to stand up and fight for them. This is probably his most famous of the series, the freedom of speech. You have the freedom of worship. You have the freedom from want, and the freedom from fear, from sickness, I think, and violence and war, and so health. You have like shelter and food. You have worship, like religious worship, but I think also just like for freedom of thought, for instance, which is also, again, freedom of speech. And this figure who's standing up, one sort of, it has this Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, kind of Cary Grant-ish kind of thing here, where this man is kind of, you know, like a working, literally blue-collar worker in his kind of grubby clothes who's standing up for what he believes in, right? So these, what's kind of remarkable, in fact, where did I bookmarked that? I think this is remarkable. So he makes this series of paintings. They end up going on tour across the United States in this kind of touring exhibition that's co-sponsored by the Saturday Evening Post and the U.S. Treasury Department, and to help raise the sale, or to help sell war bonds, to help fund the war. This is back in 1943. It raised $133 million in 1943 money, which is the equivalent of $3.2 billion, right? And that would be even more today, right? That is crazy. He didn't do this all by himself. There were other things involved in this exhibition tour, but to be involved in an effort like that raises, like, you know, we hear of some artists, athletes donating $1 million to a museum or to a hospital. Norman Rockwell raised $3.2 billion. That's got to be a record for raising money for not really a charity, I suppose, but anyway, what else do I want to mention here? You know, basically after World War II ends, or actually, sorry, I should also go back. During the same year he was doing all these paintings, a fire broke out in his studio, destroyed all of the props and the costumes that he had to create his paintings. Because often this is how Norman Rockwell would create an artwork, is that he would have friends and family dress up and pose. He would take photographs and use those photographs to create his paintings. So this is a famous painting of Santa kissing Mommy, like the song. And you can see he's got this kind of little backdrop. And so he had this just huge, these like tickle trunks full of different kinds of costumes, hats, jackets, canes, and pipes, and all sorts of things. Imagine how fun that would be to be a kid, be one of Norman Rockwell's kids, and just have like infinite costumes. Anyway, 1943, the studio mostly burns down. All of these props disappear, which is super tragic. And he loses dozens and dozens of paintings, sketches, a lot of his archive of earlier work. Whatever hadn't been, you know, sold to collectors, a lot of that was destroyed. And so that becomes like a major pivotal moment in his life. From really that point forward, his work becomes more socially engaged, more political. Norman Rockwell starts making art about the civil rights movement, about racism, about the poverty in America, and also, you know, kind of on the opposite end, really becomes quite a big champion of the space race and space exploration. So you have this artist who's generally seen as sort of just a tool, arm of the American government, you know, propaganda effort, especially during World War II, to being this artist who becomes more nuanced about how he sees the United States and its role in the world, to the point where some people start seeing him as being, you know, a heretic, and, you know, outright questioning some of the actions by the American government and culture, right? Especially if I can find that painting. Let's see. Well, I'm just going to open up a whole bunch of these here. So where do we go? So he did. Here's a famous Rosie the Riveter painting. He's not the one that invented the Rosie the Riveter image, but he certainly kind of added to it. But this is I guess probably his, maybe arguably his most famous painting of all time, which is this young child who's being escorted into a school while accompanied by all of these U.S. federal marshals who are attempting to desegregate a school in the South. And this is actually based on a real person. This is Ruby Bridges. She was the first African-American child to desegregate the all-white William Frantz Elementary School in Louisiana. And actually later on, there's a recognition at the White House and for her, but this painting is brought to the White House when Obama was there and displayed in the background as a way of sort of kind of showing how this whole situation came full circle. But this painting was quite controversial because, again, Norman Rockwell sort of represents this very, Disney-ified, people will literally use the description, a very Norman Rockwell America, meaning a very white, mostly conservative, just these very conservative American values. And yet he starts making artwork like this, which is much more controversial and sort of puts him, he becomes sort of less tethered to that reputation as he gets older. And I think he starts, because he recognizes that he's kind of been not co-opted, because he's been a full participant throughout his career in how his work was seen and used. But I think, just as anybody when they get a little bit older might be a little bit more fearless about how one is seen and appreciated. Okay, I want to let's just take a look at some of the artworks he was doing. So in like 1911, right, he's just finishing art school. He then starts doing all these illustrations for Boy's Life, again, the Boy Scouts of America magazine. And then it's in 1916 where he starts doing the illustrations for the Saturday Evening Post. So again, a lot of these remind me a lot of art that artists were making in Europe in the mid 1800s. Like you have there's a, like, who would be, like, to some extent, like Daumier or like William Hogarth, even though Hogarth is 100 years even before that. But just these very, like, who's another artist? A lot of Dutch art was similar to this, in like going all the way back to the 1600s. So he's really tapping into a very classical approach to art, which was totally out of vogue within mainstream art at the time he was making these. Like, he, in terms of like the way that maybe other so-called fine artists like Picasso, Matisse, Frida Kahlo, Emily Carr, A.Y. Jackson, all these other artists that we've looked at from our modern era, he was seen as definitely totally retrograde as opposed to avant-garde. He's like about as far behind the times as you can imagine. So that's why he never was really appreciated at all during his lifetime, except right towards the end where he's getting some accolades. But for the most part, he's just kind of a little bit on a world to his own. I mean, I think partly it's that what some people might see as kind of the lack of criticality towards some of these images. But to be fair, he's an illustrator who's being asked, commissioned to do these by a very, very mainstream American magazine. Anyway, I do want to just kind of take a moment before we move on just to talk a little bit about Santa Claus. So this is the image that we're painting here, and I wasn't able to track exactly where it's from, But I did find this plate on eBay, and on the back of the plate there is some information. Painted in 1955 by Norman Rockwell, certified by the Rockwell Society of America, and granted the seal of endorsement and authentication of the Norman Rockwell Family Trust. 15th in an annual series made in a limited edition, permanently closed by Edwin Knowles on December 31st, 1988. So this print was originally created in 1955, as we see today, and was put on this plate in 1988. So that's another thing too, with Rockwell. Not so much anymore, but I remember as a kid, like on late night TV, those infomercials would come on, and there would always be, you know, I can't remember what the name of that company was that was always putting out like these little, we might call them like tchotchkes or whatever, these collectible plates and spoons and posters and all sorts of things featuring work like this, or commemorating the Queen of England and Princess Di and all that kind of stuff. I do want to just quickly, since we're talking about Santa Claus, let me see. One of the reoccurring things that Rockwell did throughout the course of his career is make not only calendars and magazine illustrations, but he would make these kind of like posters that would often be like inserts in magazines, and many of them would be based on Christmas themes. Like every magazine would have like a Christmas issue that would come out at the beginning of December, and the Post, as well as Boy's Life, would create these Santa related images, because Santa at the time was kind of like a, is this gonna open? No. Okay. Was, the way that he was depicted throughout history has kind of changed quite a lot, right? I mean, here's the Saint Nicholas, and then you have kind of Santa as this kind of warrior figure. Here's another kind of image of Saint Nick, and then again, here we have, so it's like this, it's always been this kind of bearded guy, but some of them are kind of menacing, including even some of the early Norman Rockwell images. It's really the first person to really create the and fully crystallize the image of Santa as we know him is Hayden Sundblom, and who was commissioned by Coca-Cola to do some artworks for Christmas, and he's the one that really is he takes, because Norman Rockwell had done kind of Santa-themed paintings since 1916. This comes out in like early 1930s. So, and he's creating these painted images for Coca-Cola for the next 3 decades. But this is where we first see all of the key Santa images, including the big belt, the really big belly. You'll notice the earlier versions of Saint Nick are a much thin, taller guy. These big rosy cheeks, the big hat. Many of the earlier images of Santa Claus don't feature that big floppy hat. It's more that kind of pointy hat. These big boots. I did want to mention that because I'm sure some people would say, hey, wait a second, you're saying that Norman Rockwell invented Santa Claus? Hayden Sundblom did it. So I just wanted people to know that I'm aware of that connection. Okay, I think there's a bunch of other stories that I want to tell, but wow, let's get going. So, let's do a bit of underpainting now. So, we've got the Imprimatura applied, and then I put on this extra little bit of color. So we've got this beautiful, slightly tanned canvas. It's nice and primed. I don't know if you can even see Santa's face here at all, but that's okay because we're about to paint all over it. Now the thing is if I want to just start painting this, two ways we could go about it. We could literally just start applying color, but we might lose some of these details, like where the eyes and nostrils and mouth and such are. So I'm going to do a little bit of an underpainting on here. Okay, so that underpainting, and we can use, there's lots of different words and definitions for an underpainting, but the way that I like to think about it is just a is like a placeholder of some lines so that we can see through them as we progress, when we start putting more layers of paint over top of it. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go back to this brown that I painted earlier. I'll put a bit more blue in there, a bit more red, a bit more yellow. And so this is a cool brown. We could use any kind of brown. We could paint with the blue or red or green or whatever, but I like the brown because we're painting a face, so faces have brown in them. And it doesn't really matter if it's warm or cool at this point because we're going to cover all of that up very shortly. So I'm just going to go over top. So again, I could see someone just jumping right to this point after you've got the drawing outlined. What else do I want to put in here? Okay, I think, oh, maybe just a few little wrinkles up here. Okay, I think that's probably good enough to get started. So, let's move to a next step. Oops, we want that. Okay. So now that we've got our underpainting just started, I just went and did a little bit of the lines on the face so that I can now paint on top of that face without so much of a worry about losing those details. Let's start working on that. What should we do first here? I think I'm going to do... In fact, let's just zoom in and see if we can see what he's doing first. So first of all, I would think he probably did some of the lines, like these little underpainting lines first to get that in place. What I'm going to do is I'm going to try to mix what we call the local color, and the local color is sort of the color that's in between all of these. Easier said than done, but it looks just sort of like this little bit of a peachy color, because we've got a lot of, we see these greens and reds and all that stuff over top of all that, and a lot of white, browns, kind of muddier greens. But we want that local color first. So let's mix it. We're going to take our warm yellow, right? Mostly warm yellow. Take a little bit of warm red. Let's stir that in together. In fact, let's just make a bigger mixture of it. Again, notice how when I do this, I kind of rolling all that paint off. I want to get... Sometimes that paint creeps up the paintbrush on top of that metal piece we call the ferrule, right? So we want to make sure that it's as little of that is happening as possible. Now we're going to take a little bit of blue, and you can see I'm talking, when I say a little bit, I mean like a little bit. You start putting blue in there, and that orange goes brown. And because this is a skin tone, we kind of, depending on how dark the skin tone is, we kind of want to be a little bit careful that we don't make it too dark. Because this is like a Caucasian skin tone, right? If we were painting an African American person, well, we would use substantially more blue. Although not that much more, because otherwise it's going to turn kind of greenish. So you just have to be careful. So let's take some of this white and mix that in there. And let's put these side by side. Okay. So we need more white. Now, I think I'm going to add a little bit more red in here. That's going to give it just a bit more of a peachier quality. It's kind of hard to tell. I'm going to put just a little bit more red in there. I think that's pretty good. On camera, it's hard to kind of really tell what that color looks like, but okay. So, oops, not that one. We want this one. So this is why it can be really helpful to have all of these lines on here. As you can see, I can paint over top of them. And notice how I'm painting down over top of where there might be, like, even through his eyebrows and such. because, you know, there's going to be hair that's going to be underneath, or there's skin that's underneath those eyebrows, right? Okay, so that definitely looks a little. Mine has a little bit more pink in than what we see on the left there, but okay. So while we're here, what should we? Let's You can see I've got lots of this paint mixed up as well. So I might just take a bit of that there, put a bit of it here. Oops. See how I just moved a bit there? So maybe, you know, if this paint is still really wet, let's just take some more red. And I'm also painting with like larger brushes, and I'm being pretty aggressive. Okay, let's just add a bit more red on here. Okay. Now, maybe I'll leave that red there for a little bit. And I'm going to go back the opposite way. Let's take some more of this white. Oops. So now I'm starting to put some highlights. So this is a little bit more of like got a bit more of that peachy pinkish quality to it. So I'm just going around putting little highlights all over the place. You can see I'm still using a pretty big brush. Okay, that's pretty good for right now. I think, let's just rub that excess paint off. And let's mix a bit of a purple here. So I'm going to take my cool red and my warm blue, mix that together. And then I'm going to take that and bring this, or sorry, here's some. So there's my skin tone. I'm going to bring this purple in here. Okay. This might be a bit dark. Let me see. I might just put it in the mouth for right now. Oh, sorry. Let's get... I'm going to put a bit of this in his eyebrows. Okay. Now maybe what I should do is mix my black. So let's take our cool yellow, cool blue, need more cool yellow, and mix those two up. Now we got this bright green. Let's take our warm red, mix that up here. Now this gives me, this is much more of like a eggplant color. So it's a little bit more purple. Now what does that tell me? If I want it to get to black, what do I need? Well, actually I'm going to save part of this because I like that color. But I am going to make a black. And so if it's purple, what's the opposite color on the color wheel to purple? Is yellow. So put more of that yellow in there. Now that might make it go a little bit more brownish. So what is the color opposite? Is blue. And now we're getting pretty close. Maybe just put a bit more blue in there. And that looks like a pretty good black. It's not perfectly black. That's okay. I would prefer this than actually using black right out of the tube. So, I just give you a little bit more of an idea of what we've been up to. Where's my small brush? Okay. So, oh, maybe I should just say what I'm up to here. So what I want to do is I'm going to take this same color, this black, and I'm going to bring it into this purple, the color we were just using. Take a little bit of those flesh tones, because I don't want to just have a pure black come into play here. At least not yet. And in fact, if anything, I'm going to make it a little bit more on the purple side. Just to, because this is human flesh, so I think that'll just give it a bit more, you know, life. So it's really, really, really dark brownish purple, which I think is going to be perfect. Oh, there's Stacy made a donation through the super chat function. It says, "Thank you. I did mine on fabric, waiting for you." That's awesome. Can't wait to see how it turns out. Hopefully you're posting it on the Facebook right now. Okay. So now I'm going to take this color and let's kind of go in and do a little bit of detailing here. So remember, I've purposefully not used the darkest color I could possibly mix. Because I will make a black here eventually. And you know, I should have painted the white of those eyes, but we'll get to that eventually too. Just have to be careful not to overdo it. Just kind of rolled it in between my fingers. I'll just do that again. And just take it and kind of pinch it to get a pointier tip. Now I'm probably going to use a little bit of my black to go back over little things like eyebrows and such later. It's interesting, these like wilder old man eyebrows, right? Okay. Maybe, you know what, I'm going to take a bit of Cool Red, mix that down in here for the mouth. So I just took my Cool Red, my magenta, added it to this. And then here, I'm going to paint in the mouth this cooler color. Okay, I think that's good for right now. I think now what we want to do is we've got a pretty good job of getting the basic parts of the face in place here. I even wonder, you know what, maybe I should do before I go even further, is just put a little bit of gray in the white of his eyes there. So what I'll do is I'll take my white, and I'm going to mix it with this color we have here. You could just use your black and just add white to it. But you see, I've got just this little slightly more purpley gray, which I like, kind of on this theme. Ah! There's some water on that brush. Shoot. Where did that water come from? Let's do that again. You know, there are other details where I want that in the face, but you know, maybe I'll just wait for a moment. And because what I want to do now, the reason why I don't want to spend too much more time and get this quote unquote perfect is we still have you know, the whole rest of his costume, that hat and beard, and I don't want to get that perfect before this is at least outlined. Right? I always like to kind of move around. Okay. So now that we've got the face begun, what I want to do is I want to paint the hat and his beard and get that started so that I don't go too far down the line here getting his face correct, because that's only one part of it. So I want to build those other aspects of this painting in next. So let's look at what we could do first. I think let's paint the red of his hat next. And then we'll paint the white. We'll paint a little bit of his hair and etc. So let's use our warm red. And actually, that was a lot of paint. Let's just take... Okay, now let's add come on. Hard to get it just right, isn't it? So I'm just going to take just a... I'm going to take a little bit of this black that I had from earlier. And I'm going to put a little bit of cool blue in it, which is what he's doing. That gives it this really intense, darker quality. Okay, and I'm just going to wash that brush. I'm just taking a bit more cool blue. And now let's take a bit of white. It's interesting, he's putting... So I need a bit more white in here. These little bits of blue and purple and stuff in the hat. Okay. Now let's take... In fact, maybe we should mix that green before we go any further. So he's got this kind of grassy green. So I'm going to take some of my warm yellow and warm blue, mix them together, and also take a little bit of my black. Just going to kind of kill the intensity of this color a bit. Okay. And I'm just going to wash my brush again. And now I'm going to paint, let's take this white. And I'm going to paint it in here, and then I'm going to kind of slop it in, and then I'll kind of modify it a little bit while it's still a little bit wet. So I'm not sure how well that shows up on camera, but there is a little bit of a difference between the paint that I put down there previously. You know, this is my background color. Okay. Now let's take a little bit of that color. Got a bit of that red up top there. That's okay. We can always get rid of it. No big deal. Okay. just kind of go back up. So now as I'm going, I'm taking just more paint, more of this green, and bringing it into here. I think I need just a bit more warm blue in there. Take a little bit of cool blue. Okay, I'm gonna get some more white on there. So don't worry, you know, I'm kind of going a little bit wild with this blue, but that's okay. I'll paint some of this out later. Can you even use this color on the face? Not quite just there yet, but okay, now we'll start going down to the beard here. I like this bit of kind of a cool blue green in here. It's not quite like the original. But I like how mine looks with it, so. But I still have a little bit of work to do, so it could also change and go a bit back to that same green that was there before. Okay, let's just take a look and just see where we're at this stage here. Cool. So I'm just going to clean that brush. Okay. Tea break here. Okay, so let's go back in here. Let's get more of this green. In fact, I'm just mix a bit more of it. So I'm taking my warm blue and a bit of my cool blue. Oh yeah, I was gonna do a little bit of the hair. I'm going to take a bit more of my black, make it a bit more grayish. A bit more black. Okay. So I'm taking this kind of grayish green. Remember, if you don't like where some of these brush strokes go, or what they're doing, we can always paint, and we will use some white over top of this afterwards. It's not really committed to anything just yet. Okay, now I notice there's like maybe a little bit of possibly skin or something back there. I'm not sure. Maybe he's not sure either. I'm just gonna take a bit of my flesh tone and put that in there. Okay. Let's take more white and this green. We need just a bit more. Let's just put a different yellow in there. So I'm just mixing a bunch, trying to get the color that I want. And it's kind of this muddy green, and maybe I still need more white in there. And you know, I'm not sure if I like that brush stroke I just put in there. So I'm just gonna get my rag, get it wet. Okay. Now I'm gonna take some white. Take some white and some matte medium to make it a little bit more transparent. Maybe that's a bit too transparent. So let's just take more white. Now I'm just going to take just a little bit of that. Bring it in here. And I'm just going to kind of quickly paint with this. So it's kind of like I'm just smearing a little bit of this paint around. It's going to be very subtle. We'll see how much of this actually... Oops, a little bit lighter. Now while that's drying, just take some actual white. Like pretty much right out of the tube here. Okay, I'm just going to come back over all that paint that's still kind of, oops, it's still a little bit too dark. I'm just going to use a little bit of this same color. Okay, I'm going to take my warm red. I'm going to come back into the hat again. Let's zoom in here. So I'm just, with this actual just pure red. So this is going to help make these cheeks look more round, which is going to give more of that jolly expression to his face. Still have a little bit of a ways to go with those details, but I think also at this stage, I'm going to take my skin tone and I'm just going to go back over these eyelids and make them just a little bit more closed. I'm just going to make him look a little bit more jolly, a little like more laughing. Okay. Perfect. So we've been painting for about an hour now, and this is where we're at. I'm feeling really good with this. Like, I mean, I think if you could get your painting to this stage, that would be more than good enough. I'm going to keep on working, obviously, but, you know, I think for the most part, we're there. What I want to do is I want to add some kind of wrinkles around his eyes. I want to, like, really finish out with smaller brushes the beard and the hair on his forehead. Really what I'm doing is I need more contrast. I need to get my highlights to be brighter, and I need the shadows and dark areas to be darker. So I'm going to add more and more darker colors and more lighter colors, because the more extreme those differences are, the more we're going to the more dimension it's going to look, the more the expression's going to look really emotional. So I think it's time for the tea strainer. Nom, nom, nom. So, yeah, because what we need to bring out these little wrinkles around those eyes to make them look like they're really kind of squishing, because they're really, like, right now, it's a little bit undefined, right? We want to get all of that, those, showing the cheeks pushing up against the eyes, and the more closed they are, you know, it's like the more that smile is really compressing those eyes. Lolly said, slop it in is the technical art term. Yes, you are right. So another thing too, just thinking about Norman Rockwell, is this is often also just, if we just think in general of the overall 20th century approach to art, you wouldn't want to go much further than this. You'd want to keep it as loose as possible. So I think the genius of Rockwell is he keeps it pretty loose. Like we see in these brushstrokes here, how kind of wild and loose they are, but then he's getting little details where they need to be. You know, we talked a while ago about another artist who is a really important art teacher, is Robert Henry, and his kind of style of very loose painting is, I'm sure, that Rockwell would have been influenced by, he would have seen. I don't have any knowledge of them meeting or having, of Rockwell taking classes with Robert Henry, who was, you know, an important figure in New York art, New York, Chicago, Philadelphia, with what we call the Ashcan School of Art. But he definitely is. I'm sure there would have been people talking about the both of them in the same sentence back in the day. Okay. I think what I want to do now is let's just make a new. Okay. So now we've gone over really everything here. It's now just tightening up the details. So especially around the eyes and cheeks, I think that's where we need the most amount of work. But then of course in the whiskers. So I think I'm going to get the face complete right now, and then we'll do some finishing touches. So let's put these two fellas side by side. And think about, maybe I'll zoom in. So what I want to do now is I want to get a brown that I can use. So let's take our warm, you know what, I need a bigger brush. Let's get our warm blue, warm red. Let's mix that up. That gives us instantly a very dark purpley brown. The reason why it's not more more brownish, still purpley, because we don't have any yellow in there yet. There we go. Now we transform that purple into brown. Now that might look, I mean, it's a great brown, but it's still way too dark. So we're gonna use a little bit of this paint here and mix that in. And that might be as dark as we need to go. I'm also going to add, let's pre-mix this too. I'm taking my cool red, take a little bit of my cool blue as well. It's too much. Because what I want is this kind of magenta, that purple, very crimson-y color. Let's take some black, put that in there. I think that's going to be good. I keep thinking, oh, it needs to be darker, but you know what? That'll probably be plenty dark enough. In fact, it's probably way too dark. That's always the weird thing is sometimes you're just like, oh, I need it darker, darker, darker. Put more, mix some black in here to get it. And then as soon as you put it on, you're like, whoa, that is way too dark. So let's go to, oops, a lot of blue on there, oops. Okay. So not quite dark enough, so I just added a little bit more of my brown in here. Take a bit of this brown and bring it into the mustache ever so slightly, especially underneath. Okay, and here's some of that purple coming back in, or it's like a really deep crimson. Just sort of painting a bit over that tongue to darken it down a bit. Okay. Let's take that purple and just kind of lighten it up a bit. So now we're just going to kind of go around with these browns and pinks and just add some kind of little nuances all over the place. Let's get some red now on there. So you can see like these, you know, the sides of this eye are going to be darker. The sides of this eye, because the light is sort of coming from the left. Okay, now I'm taking that purpley color and just sort of going around the edges of the hat. Darkening that in. So now right now we mostly just have like browns and reds. I think we need a little bit of some other colors in there, just as he's done, to get a bit more of this kind of greenish quality going on. So let's just take some of this green, take a little bit of our skin tone. And this is where we really start kind of giving it a bit more personality. Okay, a little bit of that green. Let's just take a bit more yellow. Yeah, let's just take a bit more yellow. Okay. Now I'm going to take my white. I'm not even going to bother cleaning my brush because I just wiped excess paint off. And you can use a mop brush or a blending brush or just your finger just to kind of smudge the paint around a little bit. Poor daughter's having a tough time crying. Still not feeling better. Okay. We're getting close. One thing I'm just going to do now is just take more of this white and just go over like his hair here. Or his whiskers, I mean. Which is hair, right? But, and as like Thomas Kincaid used to say all the time, you can never put too much white on because it'll dry and then you might want to go back over it again. So as it dries, it might get a little bit more muted. Let's go down here. Now remember, I've got a canvas that is not white. I've purposely painted it to be a little bit eggshell. So any pure white is going to stand out against that background. So bearing that in mind, I just want to be careful. I want to kind of blend that out. This is great. I'm happy that I put that, made that background a bit eggshell, because now it's the beard and everything, all of this rather than just sort of seamlessly blending into the background, it's popping a little bit more. Now it's going to, as it dries, that effect will kind of go away a little bit. Okay, let's go back to his hat. Let me see, how am I doing here? Got a little speck of something there. Let's see if I can clean that up. Well, it's mostly gone. Good enough. Okay, I think... What I want to do now is, I just want to do a little bit more touches in this area here. So let's take our cool blue and black. So the reason I'm also using that cool, or the cool blue and the black together, is because we've got all this red. The cool blue is going to work really well in opposition to it, sort of naturally. So it's going to, it's you know, one of the big things like the Impressionists showed us is if we put complementary colors, colors that are opposite from one another on the color wheel, next to one another, there's kind of like a tension. It's going to make each color seem more extreme. So it's going to make, so if you put a blue next to a red, the red looks more red and the blue looks more blue. In this case, it's going to make the red look more red and the dark areas look even darker. So now, you know what? I'm going to blow dry this so that I can get at those details without having to worry about my hand, because I started kind of stamping, and I have to be careful because, you know, I won't be able to get the background back to the same place it was if I make a mistake there. So. Okay. Maybe even time to say... So I think we're ready to do a little bit of finishing touches. We just need to finish like the eyebrows and eyes. And we'll see. We'll see what else needs to be kind of done, but I think we're getting pretty close. So... we've taken our black, I've mixed in some of the cool blue into that. You know what? I'm going to go to an even smaller brush. It's kind of remarkable how once we get those little bit of darker lines around the eyes, all of a sudden it just comes to life, right? Keep darkening those nostrils. So that top eyelid is always going to be much darker than the bottom eyelid because that's the light is coming usually from above, so it's going to darken the, you know, put a little bit of shadow onto the onto the eyeball itself. This is also, you know, part of the painting that I think is, you know, where things slow down, because I end up kind of, you know, one of the most difficult things is getting the eyes to look like they're going in the same direction. It's also going to change dramatically when we put the highlight on there. Let's get these eyebrows in next. And we'll put a few little streaks of white in there to remind people of that he's a bit of an older fella. I love that just little wayward eyebrow there. Just that little one that's kind of going in a bit of a different direction. Great attention to detail. So as I get these darker values in here, it's going to make that nose pop a little bit more. Okay. Let's take a bit of white. should have blow dried that because it's still kind of wet. Again, more white, just going back onto these cheeks, onto the nose. Onto those eyes. Oh yeah, I gotta get a little bit of stuff done right at that ear. Now just taking that purple again. Let's come back up into... Okay. And let's see here. Haven't really given too much attention to this side of the face. Ah, I'm not on camera. Darn it. Oops, that's a little dark. Ah, yeah. Okay, so I just made a bit of a boo-boo. Let's just get some water on here. Okay, I think... Let me just see if I've got what I want so far here. I could keep on adding more and more wrinkles around those eyes. Let me just do a little bit more. That's pretty good. I just want to come back with my black. So I'm just using the black to one more time darken that top eyelid. Just gonna add a bit of just this little bit of white. I don't know. I think that's probably good enough. Oh, you know, I was going to do the signature. Should I do the signature? His signature is a pretty big part of his work. And he's done that really subtle. If I use a Posca pen there, it's just going to leap off the page. What's my lightest Posca pen? I need a gray. And that, you know, his hair there. I need to get rid of that purple gray. So we'll do the signature. see which colors I have. I thought I got another gray. I know I've got a smaller gray. Well, let's see. Wonder if this will be. In fact, let me fix that hair now. Just take some white. That's better. Okay, so let's zoom in. Just going to do this to focus it. Oops. Not my finest. I could barely see what was there. see this face now. That hair. Ah, bunch of water came off that brush. I need to be in the better habit of just drying a brush off when I pull it out of the water. Be careful, that signature. Ooh, Michael. Okay, I think that's good enough for government work. So, we're at that time of the painting where we are going to do our side-by-side comparison. I'm pretty happy with the way this one turned out, especially considering, you know, it's not the easiest, but it's also certainly not the most complex Norman Rockwell painting. And there's a reason why it took him months to get anything done. So, if you enjoyed today's episode, please like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, join the Facebook group. Let me just show you again that Facebook group. There's new people joining every day. Almost at 600 people. That's so exciting. People already posting stuff. That's so cool. So join that Facebook group, upload your artwork to it, and then I think it might be this weekend. We'll take a look at them and celebrate them. I'll give you some free advice. If you want to leave a donation, a small or large one, as little as $1, feel free to use the PayPal, Super Chat, contact me via my email or the Facebook group. Your support is what keeps this whole thing up and running, so I appreciate it. Thank you for those, especially those of you that have been supporting me for years. That's really awesome. So, here is the original Norman Rockwell. And there's my version. I do notice, now that I'm looking at it, underneath that area, maybe we could just take a quick little bit of paint. Let's see, anything still wet here? Not the right color because I'm just mixing it on the fly. So I'm just going to bring a bit of that other color, of that new color, elsewhere. That's probably good. Okay. And that's also darker, but I think that's fine. All right. So there's the original. Let's dive in and just see how they look up close. Maybe let's start with the hat. Like you could see, I didn't even get that little zigzaggy line in there. That's kind of neat too. Yeah, I mean that. I think we're pretty close. Let's look at the top of that hat. I could have done a little bit more bold marks up there. I kind of painted them over a bit. You know, there's a little bit of that purple gray hair. I don't mind the way that looks, though. That's fine for me. Let's go down here. Yeah, I guess there could have been more green going on there. Warm green. Signature. Mine's a little bit sloppy. How about, yeah, let's look at that. Might as well just go right in on the face there. So mine is a little bit looser. I would say that my painting, he would have, like, this painting would have appeared on his palette, or his his painting would have looked like mine about 2 or 3 hours before it was finished. So he would just keep refining, keep on kind of adding more and more smaller little details in there, in those little wrinkles, and I would get more and more precision. But I think, like, for you know, a couple hours work, that's not bad where we're at right now. I could maybe even have a bit more red on the top of that cheek. Maybe I'll even add a little bit more. Quickly, just a little bit more warm red. I think that's good. Okay. So, thank you everybody for painting along with me, and I can't wait to see what you have done. If this is your first time watching, please consider tuning in again and again. If I don't see you for a little while, have yourselves a Merry, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and we will see you guys in the new year. Well, I will be here on Thursday making another painting. We're going to be looking at J.E.H. MacDonald, the father figure of the group of 7, the oldest of the 7, or well, there was 10 artists eventually, but the voice of reason amongst these sort of younger, wilder group of guys. And really one of my favorite artists of all time, as they all are, but he's right up there. Okay, have a great night, everybody. We'll see you again. Good night.